Hello out there, and welcome back to My Grocery Adventure. This is a podcast for people who want to make an impact. My name is Carly Wharton, and I am your host. If you are listening only, do know that you could also see our faces. You could join us on the YouTube channel. Feel free to subscribe and comment. I would love to hear your thoughts on this episode and any others that you check out. Every bit of your engagement helps push these out into the algorithm so that other people can find them and connect with them as well. So thank you so much for all of that you're doing. Today's guest, I'm so excited for you guys to get to meet her. I mean this with all due respect. She is an absolute glow stick of a human being. I just absolutely adore her energy. And with that, I would like to welcome to the podcast Marci Penner. Thank you so much for being here. How are you today?
I'm good. Hi, everybody.
Welcome, Marci. Do you want to start by telling us just a little bit about who you are and the work that you're doing right here today before we dive back into your whole story?
Yeah, I'm the co-director of a nonprofit, Kansas Sampler Foundation, whose mission is to preserve and sustain rural culture, which gives us a lot of latitude. And I've been doing this for 30 years. And the reason I say that is we're a little bit in a transition phase ourselves. We've added a co-director. And the reason I'm bringing this up in my bio part here is because I'm taking co-director Sarah Green to every incorporated city in Kansas over the next 4 years to get that kind of training. I mean, Sarah's already has a wealth of knowledge and experience and network, but to go into every community to talk to the people in their environment makes a big difference. And this includes going into grocery stores, which is why I bring it up. And, to walk the aisles, to talk to the clerk, hopefully the owner, is a lot different than just seeing a Facebook post or something. So, I've gone to every town in the state a couple of times to research for guidebooks, but this time it's more to ask about the health of the community in terms of, does the community like itself? Who are the leaders? Are young people involved? What's going well? What are the exclamation marks? Where are you stuck? How can we help?
Mm.
So that's just a little bit of where we are right now, where I'm at right now.
Gosh, I adore your work, and I can't wait to hear the life that brought you to it. Because from the little bits that I know, it seems very organic in the way that it just kind of like unfolded itself. I don't know if you would agree with that characterization.
Well, Dad and I started 30 years ago, and the first thing we did was go on the road to write a shorter guidebook. And the road work is where it was the launch for everything we did. From there, we realized that Kansans didn't know their own state very well. So 3 years after that journey started, we formed the nonprofit to educate Kansans about Kansas in a way that would produce an audience, a thoughtful audience for rural communities. And the other thing was that we found one community would be doing something really great, but there wasn't a way to share it. Back then in 1990, pre-social media, everything, there wasn't a way to share it in a way that other communities could utilize the information. So the nonprofit was about how to share, how to network and support those rural communities with their excellent grassroots ideas, or to help people know what the issues were, the people that could help them, the rural advocates. Right. So there had been a big disconnect, especially through the volunteer-led communities. There wasn't a way really to connect that well with state agencies or organizations that really did want to help. So anyway, 30 years, lots of things have gone on. Our offices are located on the farm that I grew up on, which will be 150 years old next year. I say offices, but it's been 2.5 staff, part-time bookkeeper for many years. And just now, thanks to a support from Patterson Family Foundation, we've been able to add 2 more staff. But the way I'd like to say it is this grant allows us to support rural communities better. And one way we've done that is by adding staff. One of those staff, her focus is to work with Power Up's 21 to 39-year-olds who are rural by choice, which is how I met you in those interviews. I mean, anyway, a short version of many years of working with rural, which has, my passion just grows every day for this work.
I love that. So like the work itself is life-giving, right? Like energizing, like kind of pulls you into it further and further and further.
That's right. And you use the word organic. And, I just follow the pull of what's needed. And it is life-giving for me, and hopefully for rural communities and their people. Things are most beautiful when they work both, the mirror effect. So
sure.
I'm not in this just for myself. That would be a little boring, as I know, same for you. So to see your work connect with people on the other end.
Yeah.
Is where the life-giving part comes in.
Absolutely. And I feel like this audience, I mean, it's a podcast for people who want to make an impact. Like how you go about doing that. I mean, that's the subject of many, many conversations that we could have. But yeah, to see your work connect in the lives of real people to make a real difference in the quality of real people's lives. Like, I don't know what better form of payment there is. Like, I lost interest in money quite a while ago, and like that's really what I'm in it for, is like impact. I want to make a positive impact.
Well, I'd like to say to the listeners or viewers, what a special podcast interviewer we have here in you, Harley. I think sometimes it takes younger people a long time to get to what you just said. And so I want the people listening to know that this podcast is only being done to further the cause of getting groceries into small towns. It's not an easy task. So, Carly, thanks for the reasons why you're doing this.
Thank you. This is why I call you a glow stick, because you can't help but just light other people up. You just take yourself around like this butterfly and share light with everyone you meet. I've received it many times. And yeah, thank you. I'm so glad we met through the Power Up interviews and that you have somebody dedicated to that full time, because yeah, I mean, these people that have made that choice, that of course I could chase money in the big city. I did that. That's what got me out of the illusion that money is fulfilling. I had to burst that bubble for myself, and I'm thankful that I got to do that. And then I decided like to pivot and let's orient ourselves towards something that actually is fulfilling and making a difference in people's lives. Like that's hard to beat.
Well, I think you're attracted to the need and the possibility of helping.
Exactly. The puzzle that you're describing of like, you see the pieces, you see this need and you see the resource and the gap between them. And like, I've called myself a bridge builder many times like that. I just want to make the connection. And then mostly I want to move on and make another connection and make another connection, Yeah.
And the beauty is we learn from each bridge. So the next bridge gets even stronger. I
Totally.
think people see rural communities as sometimes as a dying demographic, but I see them as potential. Um, and some of the most passionate people live in these towns because it's not always easy to sustain them. So those that are, working like crazy, they have this spirit that just is pretty amazing. And anyway, the bridge building, the networking, it just gets stronger and adds on and adds on. And hopefully the listeners can become part of that as well.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So yeah, with that, I would love to jump back and hear, where were you born and where did you grow up?
Right here on this farm, which is Inman. So we're 5 miles outside of a town of 1,100, in the middle of Kansas, 50 miles north of Wichita. And I graduated from Kansas University, eventually went to University of Wisconsin to get a master's in counseling and guidance. 5 years in Wisconsin, 5 years in the Philadelphia area as a elementary guidance counselor, coaching as well along the way. And then back home to Kansas in 1990, not originally by choice, but a medical reason. And I'm kind of glad that, because I became rural by choice.
Mm-hmm.
I loved growing up rural, but I didn't know that I loved it until it wasn't part of my world. And then I came back to it, and it took me a while, travels with Dad and talking to people, to really see how much there was to love and to choose.
Yeah.
And so that phrase currently describes me as well as anything, to say I'm rural by choice and Kansan by choice.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
have lots of warts in
It's a
Kansas
journey.
being rural,
It's a journey. Yeah.
but without the friction, how would we find forward movement? So, which means something different to everybody, but
Yeah.
uh,
You
yeah,
said
so
that.
I'm back full circle to where I started, only with a different, richer perspective.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I feel like I've been on a similar journey. That full circle
Yes.
part is kind of a big deal to get the fresh perspective on just how beautiful it really is. And I wonder if you would share, you say you loved growing up rural. I wonder if you could paint a picture for people who just have never lived in a place like that. Like, how many people were in your school class? Let's start there. And like just kind of paint us a picture of, what does that mean to grow up rural?
Yeah. I love this question because I don't think anyone has asked me this, maybe in forever. Way to go, Carly.
Yeah, yeah.
There were 4 in my first grade class. And
I was
fourth
not expecting
grade,
that. That's really
and it sounds like back in the one-room schoolhouse days,
exactly.
it was a 2-room schoolhouse through fourth grade. And then anyway, eventually consolidations of country schools, and I graduated from Inman High School with 37. And I didn't know that was small. I didn't know we might not have everything. I could play. They didn't have girls' athletics until my junior year. And I was a little bit rabble rousing about that. So that was my first activism in helping that happen.
What did you do?
I wrote every principal in the league saying why we needed girls basketball. And I guess I should have first told our principal that I was doing that, because I got in trouble. But within a year, our superintendent became our first girls basketball coach. So that turned out okay. But nowadays, what I hear is that kids get to play every sport um, because they're in a small school and they get really good attention. And, the community raises you up and knows you. And, I think even today, being raised rural, what it meant to me was when we had a walkout at school one day, I think because the boys won some sporting event and there was a walkout. Not sure why we had the walkout, but for me, what I did with that option of all the things that I could have done on walkout day, I chose to come back to the farm and pull nails we were taking our barn apart. And that's what I wanted to do. And I grew up me and my two siblings, we had a empty chicken house, really 3-room, large, big building that we turned into a cafe and restaurant and dirt room. And my imagination, that's where my imagination became, just grew, and I could do anything.
Sure.
With an imagination. And I think the biggest thing was that I got a good base of love from parents, but just this groundedness on this dirt, on this 150-year-old farm.
Yeah.
I've loved living elsewhere, but I can only be content on this dirt here. And we didn't know that the grocery store, we had one. Yay. We didn't know it was small. You don't know what you don't have. So
Right.
I loved my childhood, and I just want young people to be able to go, fly away, do whatever they want. But I want to help make communities that are appealing enough that they want to come back or stay in a productive way.
Yeah.
And you don't always see those things as a kid. You only know if you feel good, accepted, all those things. And we can work on all sorts of welcoming features and expanding our minds and our leadership. I didn't really notice those things as a kid, what was going on in town. I just knew how they impacted me.
Right. You just enjoy the fruits of it. Like,
Yeah.
great. Yeah. But it takes,
Or get frustrated and write letters.
I'm so proud of you. Like, it's just part of who you are to like speak up and use your voice. Like, hey, this is a gap and I think we should close it. Like it's just kind of part of who you are, it seems.
No one, yeah, and you don't know maybe that you shouldn't do that. Or,
Why should
I just thought I want something so badly. How to get it, or what's the process? What's the journey? I've got to try.
Yeah.
So anyway.
I'm a big believer that, there's so much out there selling motivation to people. But really, if you want it bad enough, you don't need anybody to like get you motivated. Like the desire for the thing will be all the energy, all the fire you ever need to get yourself there. And sometimes like it is a little bit of anger or injustice. Like was it a sense of this isn't fair? This shouldn't be a thing. Like we should have, this should be equal.
And I think maybe the other side, the readers of the letter, were maybe attracted to the passion, and maybe it opens some awareness that, maybe it's time for girls to get to play as well. So, but I think it's important to share your passion in a constructive way that's palatable to the other side. And I wish I had that letter still. I really do. I don't know what it sounded like.
Oh, I would love to see it. Maybe it's like framed in some school somewhere and we'll come across it. What do you mean by palatable? I think that's a good advice as far as just it's important to be passionate. It's important to have your own viewpoint, but you can't make an impact if no one's listening, like,
or if you say it in a way that turns them off to the extent that they just want to crumble the paper or dismiss you totally.
yeah.
Or, you can't let, I was going to say, you can't let the emotion be the leading force in the letter, but then the passion. Yeah, so I don't think that's right.
It's like
But
a balancing act.
it is.
Yeah.
And that's maybe what palatable means in this case, is the balancing, but to say things in a way that people feel like they can respond, whether it's what you want to hear or not. Like my principal called me into the office and gave me a talking to. So it wasn't palatable to him. And so the other thing is everybody hears your argument or your plea differently. And so maybe you have to read the room, figure out how each audience can hear best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What if you had gone, I mean, this is total speculation, but what if you had gone to the principal and he had just been totally not receptive to the idea and absolutely not, you're not gonna email the rest of everybody else, like, or mail it, I guess it wouldn't have been email probably, but like that you're just not going to do this. Like if you had checked in with him, like maybe, what's the right way to do it if there is such a thing? Like what if he had squashed it?
Yeah. I mean, he had let me bring in a radio station that did donkey basketball. And so the thing was, the radio station came to Inman High School to play the girls, and he let me make that happen. So there was a thing, some room there. But what if he had said no? I think I would have dribbled a basketball around his office for days on end until he gave in. It was a life for me to play basketball.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't fair.
Yeah.
On the second country school I went to, we didn't have enough boys for a softball team. It was softball, not baseball. So they let me play with them, but they called me Freddie because they didn't want the other team to know I was a girl. I mean, they knew, but they didn't want to. I don't know. I can't remember the details, but I was Freddie. I was the shortstop. Yeah. They didn't hide in the right field. So I think this might be going in a direction you didn't anticipate. So
I love it. I love it. No, this is exactly my style. Were there any other girls or were you the only one that wanted to play with them?
Oh, it wasn't wanted to. It was they couldn't play other teams without enough players. I think I was the only one. They probably only needed one more. Or hopefully other girls would have had the chance too, but
yeah. So interesting. Yeah, so okay, so then you graduate from a high school with 37 people, and then you decide to go to KU, University of Kansas. Is that what you said?
Well, I went to Fort Hays for a year, Fort Hays State, and played basketball and softball. No scholarships at the time. And I wanted to play better competition. I don't know if better is the right word, but so I transferred to KU to play for Marion Washington, who had been an Olympian, and she had quite a resume, and I just wanted coached up tougher. And so that was why I transferred. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. I went through 9 different majors until I finally had to stay with radio, TV, film because it was time to choose. But it was injuries from being on those teams that altered my direction, which led me to Madison, Wisconsin, which turned out great. You know, at the time it was the most horrible thing, but it turned out great. And then a barbell accident in the weight room changed my direction again, which eventually led me home to Kansas. So best barbell hit to the head ever, because it brought me here. Literally, I wouldn't be here without that barbell falling on my head. So I joke about it, but it's just true how life creates turns. And I learned to have a different passion with each turn. Like, I loved being an elementary guidance counselor. Mm-hmm. It became even better than coaching and playing sports myself. And then the barbell thing got in the way with episodes, and I came back to Kansas. And with the work now, it involves coaching, it involves counseling in a way, it involves the passion of sport, the passion of being a teammate. Sure. You know, you have to be a teammate with these communities. You can't be a expert to come in and just say, this is how it is. I love the team aspect of our work. And so all those things in the life of a person, if you find that palatable way to keep going forward, and still find passions within you. To me, passion was really important. And I guess I had the opportunity to live my passions. Sometimes people don't have the opportunity, maybe, but I'm lucky enough to have made it work somehow.
Yeah. Well, you say that you would have dribbled the basketball around that guy's office until he let you do it. So, I mean, it kind of sounds like you're going to just do your passion thing until there's a path for you to do it. Like, persistence? I don't know.
Yeah, some of the persistence, the dribbling forever, has manifested itself in not giving up on these rural towns when maybe we'll call them higher ups would just not see the same need to work with them. And this was decades or, years ago. Mm-hmm. So in this 30-year spectrum, I've seen a lot of changes how people perceive rural, but we did a Kansas Sampler Festival that we designed for the smallest of towns. Every initiative we've ever done is designed so that the smallest towns can be part of it. And then if the bigger cities want to jump in with us with the way we're doing it, that's great, but we're going to design it for the 75% of the cities in Kansas that are 1,500 population or less. And probably of those 75%, probably I'd say 70% of those 1,500 or less, 65% remain volunteer led, which means no paid city administrator, manager, no paid chamber director. It's all on the shoulders of volunteers to figure out how to sustain your town. Yeah. To have a town, you need to have a city clerk. You need some form of city government, but city clerks are in the top echelon of underpaid people in the state, and they're so busy. I wouldn't put it on them to figure out how to sustain a community, though some of them volunteer to help work hard for their community. Offenders.
Yeah. How many, you said you're taking your new co-director to all of the incorporated towns in Kansas in the next 4 years. How many incorporated towns are there in Kansas?
There's 627.
I knew there was like 100 and what is it, like
105 counties.
105 counties and 627
incorporated, which means they have a form of governance.
Okay.
Some people think it means they have a post office, but that's not necessarily true. So when Sarah and I, we do a county at a time, and we pick them randomly. Last week we were in a county that had two towns of about 2,200, one town of 400, and about four towns of 100 or less. And we try to talk to someone in every town. And, so you get a full spectrum, and that could be I don't want to go into that in detail, but it's different than hearing, oh, there's towns that are volunteer led that don't have one business in town that, they don't have a water tower. It's different when you're there to see it and to talk to people.
Yeah. Yeah. When you see their real living conditions, essentially, like what is it that you're really living with?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's hard to get if you're not going to just like stand where they're standing physically.
Yeah. And then you can be so impressed that even though with what you see, you wonder how anyone could love this town. And then you find out there's a lot of people that do, and they have dreams for the town.
Sure.
So in one town we went to, we drove down Main Street, and it looked like the town had better days, but they did have a great cafe on the highway. And we asked the shift manager, what can you tell us about your town that we can't see when we drive downtown? And so she started telling us about their dreams and their goals and things they were working on that you couldn't see from Main Street, from the drive. So don't judge a town by that windshield tour, that windshield impression, of just driving down the town.
Sure.
There's usually so much more going on.
Yeah.
You have to ask.
Yeah.
You have to see, you have to feel it. One town we were in, the post office staff person is really the town counselor. And unofficially, but she said, the older people come in and they're so lonely. They are so isolated here. And they talk to her, and sometimes it's just seeing her smile.
Yeah.
But she checks on them.
Yeah.
You learn a lot doing we're only 27 towns in, but it's been so informative. 6 months ago. It's awesome.
Gotta bite on it. Okay. One step at a time. Like, I love that. It's such a big goal, a 4-year goal. I'm a big fan.
I've done it. This is my third trip to every town, and it's a bite-sized tour, but that's what informs our work.
Right.
That creates our knowledge base.
Wow.
That creates our passion and our open hearts.
Mm-hmm.
And, we try to go into every grocery store, and then you notice how many towns don't have grocery stores.
Right.
No.
It's quite a few. And like what you're saying, so many of the towns have teeny tiny little populations. And when that's the case, having a grocery store there is sometimes, like they say, not cost effective. Like if there's only 100 people here, we can't run this whole big expensive operation and make it make sense. But that's where, we are seeing some different options happening where there's more collaboration between stores so they can share more things and basically bring down the cost of operating it and like do so on a smaller scale. So there's innovation happening. And that's like what you're saying, I think, is like the people in the towns, like they may have so much life bursting out of them, even if the town kind of on the facade doesn't exactly give you that impression,
Yeah, and we're trying to get a good contact in every town. So when you and the group and others come up with solutions that could be helpful to,
Right.
I'll hear what you've come up with. And then on the other side, it'll be, now which town fits this best?
Right.
And then tell you and the Rural Grocer Initiative, Erica and Ryle, and put the team to work.
Yeah, exactly. Make the connection, share
Yeah.
the resource. And
Yeah.
that's like the beautiful thing that I have learned from working so closely with RGI, the Rural Grocery Initiative, is that there are so many resources already out there. And it is so often just a matter of like making the right connection and finding the right resource. So your work, their work, other people's work in this vein of like making those connections, bringing the resources together with the people who need them, like that's something where basically what you're saying is that all you have to do is go to the town and ask a couple of very great questions. I mean, I'm not discounting the questions, impressive, but you're just listening. You're just like showing up and listening.
Mhm.
And like all of this is coming out of it. And you say like you have to feel it. Do you consider yourself a pretty intuitive person? That like when you talk to someone and like when you talk to lots of people, like you're getting something bigger that like
Yeah, because a lot of people say, well, who do you know to talk to? And because we'll talk to a variety of people, you have to be pretty in tune or intuitive with who it is, how to approach them to get their trust. So they'll tell you anything of meaning. It's the more you do it, the better you get. But one thing I've been thinking, especially after last week's tour, is um, a food, like, there's the mobile library. Could there be a mobile food truck, grocery truck to some of these towns?
mm-hmm.
And what would that take to make that happen? And it's not that easy just throwing food. And I think they've tried it in places, but some of these towns, these older folks, they just can't make the 30, 50-mile trip.
Right. One thing that I have seen that's really cool are temperature controlled grocery lockers. So you would put like a set of lockers in the community center or, wherever it's easily accessible. And then maybe a grocery store 30 miles away, you're placing an online order that they're shopping for you at the store. And then they bring, every Tuesday and Thursday, they come and load up all the orders into these lockers and you have the combination to your locker. You pop it open and like there's your groceries. And those lockers, they're not cheap, but way cheaper than a whole grocery store,
So
like
it's
those.
office box.
Exactly. It's like you get a little combination that the system is like resetting for each customer, and you just type in your little code and it pops open your door, and there's your groceries that you already paid for online when you bought them. So that was something that I saw demonstrated at the Rural Grocery Summit, June of 2022. They were talking about that was one of the models of kind of the central grocery store. And then there's this small community 20 minutes away. Some of them don't have transportation, a lot of them don't have transportation. And so rather than putting in some other kind of store, they bought, I think it was like $200,000 worth of these lockers to put over there. And now they can just deliver groceries to those lockers that are more easy for them to access.
So who paid the 200,000?
I'm pretty sure it was like the store itself was on reservation land, and the reservation spanned both of these areas, like where the store actually was, and then this other one. And it was like the reservation recruited the grocer to come in and kind of take over this store. And so the grocer paid to renovate it, I'm pretty sure. But then the tribe put the lockers. If the grocer was willing to do the operations, why would you not sell that many more groceries? But the tribe, I think, invested in those lockers because of the population not having much transportation access.
Right. Oh,
how cool, right?
Right. I missed that session at the summit, but oh, wow.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Ideas. There you go.
I have some, we'll talk more about that.
I would love to hear, like you said that you did the road work with your dad, like that very first time that you guys went. Like, what was the lead up to that? Because it sounds like it was your medical issue that brought you back to Kansas. And so then, like, how did it unfold into you guys are going to do this road trip thing?
Yeah, you're good.
I want to know.
My dad had Penner Earth Moving, and then he got into the irrigation business, and then he felt bad about he felt kind of bad in a conservation way about water. And so he decided to do something he had always wanted to do, and that was to write and photograph and record the sounds of Kansas, photograph Kansas in the prairie. And, you know, he had, I mean, his story's so interesting too. The only son on a farm, so you're supposed to be the farmer.
Right.
But he had, I'd say, more artistic, and he had to push those aside until at some point he was able to say, hey, I'm finally going to do my passion. And so he and a neighbor woman did these photo essay books, and people would say, how do you get to the places in those photo essay books? When I came back to Kansas, the only job I could hold because of the medical was with my dad. On my good days, we would start traveling the state to respond to that question. How do you find the places in your photo essay books? And so we didn't go to every town in the state for that first guidebook, but, you know, we just started traveling the state in a way that I had never done up until that point of my life. I mean, as a kid, mom and dad would take us on explorations that were fascinating, but, you know, not that often. It was a treat.
Sure.
So dad wanted to respond to that question too. How do you get to these places? And a guidebook was the way to do it. So his publishing company, which had published those 2 photo essay books, we did three small guidebooks before we became a nonprofit. And so I want the listeners to know that when we named ourselves Kansas Sampler Foundation is usually reserved for those that have private money to spend, to give away. We probably shouldn't have used the word foundation because we were a nonprofit that needed donations to survive, grants. So dad, then he was willing to help go with where my nose was going. You know, as we followed our noses for a while, people asked us to do programs about what we had found in Kansas. And we did tons of programs. And then, you know, we had a book signing party for the first book on our farm. The book came out in November, so that's when we had the book signing party. And we invited some places in the book to come set up a booth under a tent on the farm. And of course, it was a rainy, sleety, snowy, icky, cold, drizzly day in November, and 1,000 people came. And they were so hungry to know about Kansas that we gave the event a name, the Kansas Sampler Festival, to provide the public a sample of what there is to hear, see, do, taste, buy, learn in Kansas. And we had the event on our farm for 7 years. 7 more years. So after 8 years, 8,000 people parking in our alfalfa field, we had to rotate the crop. And so we started finding communities around the state who would host for 2 years. And so forth. So, but we did that event in a way that the smallest of towns could be honored with their explorery attractions. We didn't just need the big tourism attractions of the state. We wanted these explorery attractions that Dad and I figured out would help keep people going from town to town. There weren't big things, but there were those smaller, quirky, nuanced, delightful, charming, personal, scratch your head, laugh at, or smile at, plus all the good local foods, local cooking in the.
Totally.
I think I ended up far away from your question. I'm not sure.
Oh no, it was how that first one came to be. And I love that, how again it was so organic of he wanted to photograph and write, and so he did that, and then the question, and oh, that's fun, let's answer this question. And like it just really is like one little breadcrumb at a time, that you don't have to have the whole grand scheme figured out.
We had no idea where it would go.
Right.
We just were, and it was a great thing to do with my dad.
Yeah, I can't
Imagine just traveling the state, asking your dad every question, like, why those fence posts, those are made out of Osage orange hedgerow, why are those metal? And why are there different numbers, strands of fence on,
I'm sure he loved it just as much as you did. I can only imagine.
Yeah, it was great.
Oh, yeah. And so is the Kansas Sampler Festival, is that something that still goes on?
After 27 years, we decided to convert from the festival, where what that had been was all communities would come to one spot to set up booths, and the public would come to one spot to get information. We decided to convert to the Big Kansas Road Trip, where we put people into action and would choose 3 counties and help people actually explore.
Sure.
Spend money, interact with locals, dare to do dirt, not judge a town, all these things that were part of our Kansas Explorers Club tenets, principles, whatever. We wanted to help put those into action with that event rather than just get a brochure.
Yeah.
Because sometimes they get a brochure and they'd never go to the places. So we used the Big Kansas Road Trip as a 4-day magnet to get them to come to 3 counties that aren't normally thought of as tourism meccas.
Yeah.
They are. We wanted to give the public firsthand experience in rural communities. And we just asked the towns to be good at being themselves, because we didn't want to tax them. And the public wanted to see them as they are.
Sure.
Who are you? How do these small towns work?
Yeah.
And it's become a beautiful thing.
Am I doing my math right? Was that like a COVID inspired transition?
No, it was a few years before that, but we just felt the Sampler Festival format was starting to get a little, I don't want to say stagnant, because we had lots, almost 10,000, I think, at the last event.
Wow.
But we felt like we wanted those people to interact differently with Kansas, more impactfully.
Yeah.
In a way that would stick with them.
Yeah.
In a way that would impact communities differently. And even though they go to 3 counties a year, you kind of get addicted to what these rural communities can offer. And so the hope is that they'll go exploring more the rest of the year.
Sure. Just kind of get them in the groove of it. So when is it happening this year? Or did it already happen this year?
It did happen May 4 to 7 in Jewel, Republic, and Smith counties.
Okay. So is it about that same time
It's
every year?
only the first weekend-ish, first Saturday in May.
Okay.
Here it will be in Ellsworth and Lincoln counties, plus the community of Lucas.
Okay.
And it's a more simple format. We were also wearing out our sampler festival hosts.
Mm.
It was getting harder on the hosts, and we saw that, and we didn't want to contribute to sucking the life out of them. We wanted to give life.
Right.
And though it was always good for a community, it was hard on them, the festival. And
Yeah.
this format is easier.
Yeah. Yeah. So is that how you kind of like put those pieces together? It was seeing the strain on the hosts and, you know, how deep do the roots go of the experience that we're able to create when they only come into one place versus if they would go, you know, see the stone bridge that's 12 miles that way, or like whatever it is that, you know, they should actually go see it, stand there and take it in.
Yeah, exactly. So we say it's all about the pie, but for this example, I'm going to say it's all about the kolaches. So Cuba, Kansas could have had a booth at the Kansas Sampler Festival and given out a brochure or even small samples of the kolaches you can get at Betty's Cafe in Cuba, population 150. But they were part of the Big Kansas road trip this year. Wendy and I went into Betty's on Thursday, and on Wednesday, the day before it all started, and she showed us the big pan of kolache she had made. And she was hoping to sell this whole big pan. Well, after the first day, she had to wake up. She woke up at 4:30 every morning because she was overwhelmed with people coming in to buy kolaches. And the way it's about the kolaches, you can read about them, pick up a brochure, or you can taste them where they are made in the cafe where they are sold in the town that is home to this cafe. And it makes all the difference in how a person feels about the kolache, Betty's Cafe, Cuba.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Take that times 4 days worth of experiences, and you can imagine that it seeps into your soul about not only supporting small towns, but you just see things differently than you would by a brochure.
Yeah. Well, and to even, you know, one example, to go to a town where there is no grocery store and you kind of put that together and you're like, wait, so where do you buy food? Oh, well, we have to drive 25 miles that way. And then the next time you go to like pop into your store and only like, oh, it's just right down the block or it's just a couple miles away. Like that is a whole different experience now that you have in your mind this person who has to spend an hour and, you know, several gallons of gas and all of that just to go do their grocery shopping. You know, you have like the empathy of that experience now to appreciate your own life and the things that you have access to. You know, we take a lot of things for granted when we don't know how special what we have, you know, how special it really is.
That is so good. I think next year I'm going to do a stump. I have a portable stump. We do a stump game, but I think I'm going to do it in a town, and we're going to talk about things they don't see there. Like you don't see a grocery store here.
Right.
About this. So you just inspired me for a new section of the Big Kansas
Oh
Road
my
Trip.
gosh. I love it. And I love it. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I love that.
Yeah. Good.
Because you're right. They'll appreciate their grocery store more, and they'll think about, you know, they might have had the preconception that a town without a grocery store is just nothing.
Mm-hmm.
But they will meet on the Big Kansas Road Trip. They'll meet people and have experiences in that town that make them feel differently about this small town. Mm-hmm. And maybe it doesn't have a grocery store, but these people are fantastic. Yeah. They might be thinking. Yeah. And somehow they make it work living here.
Yeah.
We want them to take that away too.
Yeah. Right. There's the work that you're doing. It's for those teeny towns. I think there's also the people taking those road trips, going back to the towns that they live in, maybe with more amenities that they have access to, but with a newfound appreciation for all the services that you have access to, yeah, it's eye-opening, the work you do. It opens people's eyes. I love your shirt. Like, this is perfect. If you think Kansas is boring, you're doing it wrong. You're not looking at it. I love that.
Yeah.
Oh, so good. Well, I feel like this is a great place to leave this first conversation. I have enjoyed learning about your time. I feel like I want to go more into like your elementary school guidance counselor and coaching and like all of that, because I do feel like that is so prevalent in what you do now, the way you care and the way you listen. But possibly we can get into more of that on a future episode. Thank you so much for taking the time to tell us some stories. I've loved it. How was it for you? What was it like?
Well, once again, I will tell you that it's the way you do it. I am a little surprised I told you about the barbell thing and some other things, but I have to trust who's asking me the questions. And you do a really good job listening and making the person you're interviewing feel like you really want to know their story. Because I've been interviewed a lot of times in these 30 years, and sometimes I just want to shut it down in 5 minutes because they're not even looking at you when you're talking. And
yeah, so
it was easy for me. I enjoyed it, but I appreciate how you do it.
Well, thank you. And that's where we do get kind of into some wandering tangents, but that's life. And the stories that you did share, I thought did a really good job of painting the picture. When we move forward into the work of our dreams or chasing our passions or whatever, like we don't always do so 100% willingly. It's not always a big parade, celebration, accomplishment, achievement kind of feeling when we have to move into a different chapter of our life. But that doesn't mean that it's not still happening exactly, as it was always kind of meant to unfold. Life gets us where we need to be. And I think your story is so beautiful as far as like the breadcrumbs and the pieces of how it all came to pass. So yeah, thank you for being so open and sharing it with us.
The only thing I would say is someone needs to interview you someday, because your story is pretty.
I like my story.
It's breadcrumby too.
Yes, it's very breadcrumby. I agree. It still is. Like even with this podcast and the episodes and the guests, and it continues to just kind of one bite at a time. That's really
you follow your nose as well.
Exactly. So yeah, at some point coming in the near future, there will be some Carly episodes with me getting the interview side. But yeah, next time, feel free to ask me questions. If you have questions right back at me, that's
okay. I didn't know.
We can wander in all kinds of directions. Why not?
Great.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Marci.
You're welcome, Carly. You're welcome, and we'll talk again.
We sure will. Hello out there, and welcome back to another episode of My Grocery Adventure. This is episode number 5, and today I am rejoined by Marci Penner of the Kansas Sampler Foundation and her co-director, Sarah Green. Welcome, ladies, to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, excited for you to be here. We did cover in the last episode with Marci more about Kansas Sampler Foundation, so we started there, but we're going to dive more into it of what is this organization, what do you do? How do you make an impact in the world? We're going to get into all that good stuff. But we have not met Sarah yet. So if you would be so kind as to tell us a little bit about your background, and then we can get way more into it as we go.
Sure. So, proud Kansan, grew up in central Kansas, lived in Hutchinson, Topeka, around the state in those places. Background in journalism, went to KU. And then when I graduated, all my friends were moving to Chicago and all these places that had great big newspapers. And I moved to Hutchinson and I was so excited about it. That was kind of the start of a path in and out of journalism, in and out of state government. I worked for the Kansas Department of Agriculture, the Kansas Department of Transportation, doing a bunch of different types of roles, but I was a consultant for a while. Everything that I've done has been in Kansas, and I just feel really lucky to have sort of made this career that has led me to now being a co-director of the Kansas Sampler Foundation.
Yeah. My first question is, why do you feel lucky? What about that path is making you feel lucky?
I love Kansas. I love it so much. Where I think it has been tempting at times to think, I don't know, I could maybe live somewhere else. I don't really think I can. There is so much here. There is so much to be discovered. There is so much to be experienced. There are so many amazing people here that it just, I don't know, it only makes sense for me to be here. But I think the luck is that in some ways, I guess I've been able to kind of create my own path because there's no one to tell me I couldn't. And that's the real benefit of living here.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Wow. You seem perfect for this job that you have now. I can see why you're such a good fit. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I love that. And so how long have you been with Kansas Sampler Foundation? Like, when did you join as co-director?
I started January 1st of this year. So just almost 9 months in,
Okay.
but I've been around for a little while.
Tell us about that. What does that entail?
I don't know. I've been around as a volunteer. I worked on the second guidebook with Marci and Wendy. I have written some grants, helped with the Kansas Power Up and Go report. Just kind of hanging out in the background for a while.
And how did you come to be into it, to want to volunteer? Of all the things, I mean, it's obviously a worthy cause, but why this organization?
Why not?
Totally.
I don't know the answer to that. So I was thinking about it. I'm pretty sure I first emailed Marci like 21 years ago when I was an intern at the Hutch News, and I was there was this like dreaded summer, promotional, like get out and see Kansas, and everybody had to kind of like squeeze these stories in about all these, quirky Kansas things. And I was like, this is the best job ever. And so I was reporting a story and I emailed Marci then, and I don't know, we just kind of stayed in touch.
We kept bumping into similar our circles, just bumped into each other. And then it's hard to describe what draws a person in or an organization to a person, but clearly her love of Kansas was so evident. And we started inviting her to the retreat for rural leaders. And I mean, yeah, she lives in Wichita, Topeka, but she has she's a rural aspirationalist, as she says it. And just, sometimes you can be from bigger cities, but have this affection for smaller towns. Mm-hmm. And Sarah always did. And she just fit in with this group of rural leaders and eventually the Power Up core group. But back to her.
That's so helpful. yeah, like who knows how we get on the paths we get on, right? I love that this has been over 20 years in the making. So when you, Marci, when you conceived of needing a co-director and wanting to do this transition, like, did you have Sarah in mind, or was there an application pool, or how did that all come to pass?
Sarah had just kind of been the captain of the writing of the Kansas Power Up and Go report. And did that come before the transition?
It was all around the same time.
Yeah. So we put a transition team together, of which I'll use the word again. Sarah was the captain of this transition team with 4 others who knew us pretty well. And I don't think she had even had a inkling of a thought that a co-directorship was on the table. So these guys worked on this report, you know, talking to each other, talking to people that knew us. Sarah can explain more. But I want you to know that when that transition report started, she was not thinking in that direction. Is that right?
Marci had asked me to come on board a few years before, and I said no.
She did. She said no.
Was it just not the right time, or like there was something else that you wanted to be doing at that time?
I couldn't see it. She could see it, but I couldn't see it yet.
Okay.
And then as the transition report, was starting to end, I think the thought of being interim director became a little more in minds.
Mm-hmm.
Interim.
Mm-hmm.
But that sort of implied that I would be gone.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't to be the case. So then what happened, Sarah? How did all of a sudden?
I think I saw something on the internet that said co-director, and it was like, that's it.
Not about us.
Not about us. No.
Out there in the world.
The concept.
A co-director model is happening a lot more in other places. I think the thing I was looking at was maybe from New England somewhere. Just it's a different style of organizational structure. But as soon as I saw the word, I was like, that's it. That's it.
And I love that the word interim was sort of tossed away, because for me, co-director meant had a little more permanence to it. I don't think I asked her that for a while because I didn't want to hear her say, oh, no, don't look at it that way. But it felt more permanent. But what was it that you started to know us better, which made you feel more inclined to do this? What was that? What happened that that big grant?
Oh, yeah. We did get a grant, which really helped.
But she was working on this big grant prior to becoming co-director. And I think that writing, the story of KSF, what was possible, the future, what would happen if we added staff, which the grant was largely about. Did you start to see yourself in that?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
So sometimes people ask me what the Kansas Sampler Foundation does, and I've started saying, well, you'll know it when you feel it. This is a very feeling organization. It's very intuitive. Sometimes it's hard to explain. But with that, I think it's like, once you know, you know.
Yeah.
And so along this path, there have just been some points where we just knew.
Yeah.
And like, it's almost hard to explain it any other way than that.
I love that though, because I've felt that, where when you see it or when you smell it or whatever it is, like you get it. It's just already done almost at that point. Yeah.
There's so many parts of it that go in so many directions. Sarah helped us put all the things we do into 4 buckets. We call them buckets of work, which really helped manage kind of thinking about what we do, what we need, it helped manage it. It helped it make more sense, probably. And so that was really helpful. And when you're ready, we can talk about those 4 things, but you know, at the bottom of this, we just want to help rural communities be the best they can be at being themselves and the people in them. And that can take lots of different shapes. And when I started 30 years ago with my dad, the way we learned about what we wanted to do was by being on the road in the towns, talking to the people, seeing the people.
Mm-hmm.
And so part of the grant was that Sarah and I would go on the road to every town in the state as a means of just, I don't want to say learning the ropes, because she's been on the periphery of all this for so long, but do you feel like you see it differently being in the towns, seeing the people?
Yeah. So when I worked for the Hutchinson News, the readership area was essentially the southwest quadrant of the state. So, and then when I worked in Topeka, I always had more of a statewide focus. So I've been out, and it's not like I've never gone to these towns and talked to people and asked them questions, but this is different. And it's different with a purpose. That's not just gathering news or understanding what people think about water or agriculture or food or, things like that, like a topic. It's a lot more open-ended, and that makes it exciting and sometimes a little bit messy. But it's just been different in a really meaningful way to learn how to do this.
How many have you been to on your road trip so far?
Well, today's day 13.
Oh boy.
For town 32. So just 590 something left.
We have 4 years. We have 4 years to do it. So we've got about 590 left. But what we're doing is reframing. We want to ask questions to help reframe the future of rural communities. And you can't just talk to 18 towns. You have to, because every one of them is really uniquely different.
Mm-hmm.
And we want to know that and feel the pulse of each incorporated city in Kansas. And that's the only way to truly know how to move rural Kansas forward.
Yeah. I just love what you guys do. I love your heart. It's so evident in what you're doing. And even the words that you use, like intuitive and messy and open-ended, like there's just what looks like from the outside, like pure love and support that, like, I'll give it to you however you need to receive it. And like, I don't even know what that is until I show up and see it and feel it for myself. Just like, you don't have your own agenda, like you have an agenda of how can I love and support what's here. And I think that's like a really beautiful aspect, that when it comes to making an impact, people can sometimes put the cart before the horse of like, this is specifically what I want to do. And it's like, kind of, like, first feel what is and expose yourself to the fabric of what is. And the inspiration, like we talked about in Marci's episode last time, like it will kind of, one thing leads to the next thing, leads to the next thing. Like there's a thread that is almost already there, that like we're just kind of on the scent of it.
Carly, see, you're so good at this because you really are intuitive. You've picked up on some of the essentials of us. I think also what makes this road trip special is that we don't look for the top people in town. We just, one day the we went into a post office in a small town, and the clerk was busy, but 3 little kids were sitting on stools in front of the post office window, the buy your stamps window. And we interviewed these kids, and they were articulate. They clearly loved their town. And we don't make schedules, because if people know we're coming, they tend to put on the dog and pony show a little bit, and just really want a variety. And who are some other people we've talked to that, I mean, it's not just the Chamber of Commerce.
We talked to a woman who is watering her flowers. We go to a lot of post offices, libraries. We've been, so the vehicle, the Explorer research vehicle, ERV, does let people know that we're in town.
It's wrapped.
It's got pictures of different scenes from Kansas and the guidebook and everything. So, and she's famous, like hashtag Kansas famous. So we'll be eating lunch and people just walk in and say, Kansas sampler, what do you want to know?
Yeah,
so we get people coming to us as well.
They stop us in the middle of the street sometimes.
Literally the middle of the street. This is a true story. It's happened more than once.
And then what do they say? Like, what's so urgent that they have to stop you in the middle of the street? Like,
they're here.
Yeah, you came to our town. We want to tell you about it. One woman found us in the middle of the street and said, my restaurant isn't open yet, but I'm going to show it to you. Come on in. You know, things like that. They just really love that we came to them, and we are there to ask them questions. And we try to find someone in every town, no matter how small. And it's a hunt. Sometimes the co-op, the grain elevator co-op is the place we find them. But the search is on. We want to get a good feel. If you're incorporated, we want to know you. And, you know, we want to see things like, do you have young people involved? And, you know, we don't want to make them feel bad if they don't. We just want to know how does that register in your town about involving under 40s, under 35s? We want to know that. We want to know if they like themselves as a community. We want to know what they need. Like this one city clerk was new. She's 70. And she didn't,
She had some real like organizational things that were part of the job that just weren't in her background, and didn't really know where to go to get them.
And we can connect her.
Yeah.
We check on grocery stores, you know, how are you doing? We want to find out how they're doing. We ask about volunteer fire departments. We ask, what do you want for the future of your town? I mean, that's kind of the main, you know, that's the main thing.
And the answers are almost always surprising.
I was going to say, like, what do they say?
Well, a couple weeks ago, it was, what do you want for what would help the future of your town? A swimming pool.
A town with 300 people, no grocery store, no businesses, stop and go on the highway, so no real cafe. And the answer was a swimming pool. Because what that told us was that they feel like community without any stores, without anything.
Yeah.
They essentially have what they need to feel good about their daily lives. They feel like they're part of something. Which means for them, they're used to not having stores because it's been that way for a while. Their school is gone for about 10 years. They have evolved into finding a way to feel connected to each other. And they thought a swimming pool, without, you know, being analytical, like we want to stay connected with our kids. And so therefore a swimming pool, it just came out.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because when you ask what they want or, need for the future of their town, the things that they don't say, to your point, are kind of like almost just as interesting as the things that they do say. I mean,
Exactly.
learning a lot about they're not missing these things. And just the whole concept of rural, like when you're used to being in the small place, like you don't really miss all the things that you don't have access to. You don't really think about it unless you're exposed to that stuff regularly. And a lot of these places, they're just not. They're happy with what they have. For the most part, it sounds like. I mean, if that's the biggest thing that they could use, that's a pretty cool compliment for their town.
Well, and the other thing that tells us two things. One, if a town is well taken care of, that's an indicator maybe that they like themselves.
Mm.
Would you say?
Oh, yes. And you can feel it.
Yeah.
Again, this back to this feeling thing. You can feel it when you go into town.
You can feel if they like themselves or not.
You sort of can.
Yeah.
The other thing, though, is you might drive down a town, Main Street, a downtown that looks like it's seen its better days. And so we find people and ask the question, what do we not know?
What can we not see?
What can we not see? Like we see that your town, we don't say this.
Well, there's not a lot going on that we can see.
That we can
So,
see.
Tell us
what we aren't seeing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what did they say to that?
Amazing.
Yeah. What are some examples of things you've heard to that question?
They tell us about this guy has this dream that he wants to do for this town.
Mm-hmm.
So it's or this woman is fixing up this building to have this business. And you can't see that because it's behind, you can't see it. Or, we've got this fundraiser going for this kid, or, it's things you can't
There's a
see.
group of us starting to meet. Just things. Yeah. And a lot of it, I think it's easy for both of us, but something to keep in mind is that you just need to be open. Like this is possible because we're open. We're open to things not being a certain way. We're open to things changing. We're open to like remembering going to a town 10, 20, 30 years ago and seeing how it's evolved. And I think that's almost one of the most important things when we do talk about the future, because this is a point in time.
Mm-hmm.
What we're capturing right now is a point in time. So I wouldn't say it takes work, but part of the work is just remaining open.
Mm-hmm.
And Carly, you talked earlier about lived experience. Like, yes, it is. People are sharing with us their lived experiences, and then we take them and we try to honor them.
Yeah.
And support them if they need it. And
or turn over an issue to someone who can help.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like we can't help every issue, but we know people.
Sure.
But I think that's one of the biggest keys is just to be open and not go into any town with a set of expectations. Even if we have background knowledge, it's always helpful. But the question is, what's going on today? What's important in the future, if that means 5, 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
It's really wonderful to not have to come in as advisors, and they love that too. Everyone likes to be asked questions. How are you doing? What? I see this. Tell me about that. And one more thing, that one of the biggest issues is loneliness and social isolation, especially in these small towns. And sometimes the biggest champion of breaking that cycle is the post office clerk.
Yeah.
We've done that time and time again.
Mm-hmm.
There might not be any other regular meeting site. So they come in to see the post office clerk. And for the most part, we're pretty impressed with those people behind the counter, because they love their job because they care about the people. They'll laugh at your jokes. They'll share the news that should be shared of importance.
And keep the stuff that shouldn't be shared.
Yeah.
Mm. Mm.
Librarians, we found, are also the town therapist.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, because we don't have an agenda, for some reason they trust us, and they tell us all sorts of things that seem pretty personal.
Yeah.
I think that's where our 30 years comes in. We've gained their trust over time.
Yeah.
And so when we talk about the future,
They're open to.
they're open to, they're willing to share.
Yeah. I love that. And I mean, there's so much out there in the leadership space, especially like the team building space, about trust building. And I think you just illuminated like really how easy it is. Like if you don't have an agenda that you're trying to push on somebody else, they will mostly trust you. Like if you're not pushing your own, I mean, kind of what I would call like your own ego's agenda, like the reasons that you think are important. Like, and I wonder, is that what you mean about being open? I know you mentioned like not having expectations. Like what is maybe not being open look like? What's an example of, do you know what I mean?
Oh,
Yeah.
like we're coming in and we're going to tell you how to fix this place.
Like being advisors.
Or being directors, being directive about it.
So we wear t-shirts and shorts. You know, we don't look intimidating.
Yeah.
It's very much official sometimes.
Yeah.
Sure.
We're just us. I think you learn how to drop some lines that develop that trust right away. Like maybe a name that you know, or I see your post office is missing. That tornado really took a toll.
Mm.
And so they know that the reason they don't have some buildings left in town is because a tornado took them out.
Yeah.
And so then they trust you because, oh, you know that happened to us.
Yeah.
It's also, I think, really important, like Marci said, that we're going to them. This isn't a meeting in Topeka that everyone's expected to attend. This isn't a meeting in Wichita that everyone's expected to attend. We are going to them on purpose.
Yeah.
Because we care about them. We care about their towns. We care about their counties. We care about getting the best picture we can of rural Kansas. And I think that helps.
It's such a huge statement when you're willing to take time out of your life and be where they are. Like that, I was teaching in a course about how to support rural grocers, and that was one of my number one pieces of advice was like, never invite them to a meeting at your office. Go to their store and be in there, and if they're free to chat with you today, then chat with them. And if they're not, come back again tomorrow and let them see you in their space, because that, again, I think is such a huge piece of building trust, is that you're here for me. You're here where I am. You're trying to stand in my shoes as best you can. Like that alone communicates a lot about you and your openness to wanting to see it through their eyes. You know, you're not demanding that they come to you.
And when we're not on a schedule, sometimes we miss people. We've gone back already, 31 towns in. We've already gone back several places. Just
there was someone we wanted to see.
Or somebody who became uncovered in our, talking to people, like, everyone all of a sudden agrees, yes, you need to talk to this one person, and they're out today.
Yeah.
So, but we can do that too.
Yeah.
There's a couple of ways that we share like one thing from each town, either on our Facebook page or on an e-blast. And I think that also builds trust because we aren't exposing the warts of a town, or either saying, I mean, I don't want people to think that we don't see the issues, the incredibly complex and big issues that exist. They do. But I'm not sure you can work on those until you have the trust and kind of get to know towns at a foundational level.
Yeah. It's easy to go in, guns a-blazing, like, you should do this, you should do this. And then it's like, well, but why don't you have this in place? And, we did have a post office until the tornado came through. Thanks for, not knowing that. Like that reminds me too of like, I think a common piece of being human is that we want to be seen and we want to be heard. But in order to be heard, one of the best things you can do is listen. If you want somebody to receive from you, the best thing you can do is first receive from them, listen to them. And in that reciprocation, they're much more open to hearing what you have to say. Kind of going back to, like, don't start with your own agenda. Like, if you really want to be of service, start with the person standing in front of you. Like, what do you need? And why is that need hard to fulfill? Both pieces can be important.
There have been times we talk to someone for 20 or 30 minutes and then they say, now, why are you here?
Right. You're just having fun talking to them.
Jump in talking and then it's like, now what are you doing?
Right. Oh my gosh, that's such a good sign though, I think. Clearly they were just enjoying getting to share. Like you said, like, everybody likes being asked questions and getting to share a little bit from their side.
And if they don't, that's fine too.
Yeah.
Do you ever meet any people who are a little prickly around the edges?
Sure.
Yeah.
We even know they're not going to divulge much. So we kind of test things out before we say what we're doing, so that if they don't have time, if they're not the right person, we can leave without having to extract by having in an awkward way.
Mm-hmm.
Or, I mean, most people are very willing.
Yeah.
And I think we learn when not to ask or who not to ask. So,
and not to judge a whole town by somebody who's not into it or not having a good day or whatever. It's not indicative of a town.
Yeah.
So the previous times that I went to every town in the state, once with Wendy Rao, co-author of a guidebook, it resulted in a Kansas guidebook. We're still unsure about what we'll do with all this information, but we do know we want to share it with organizations, state agencies that will treat it gently or use it to form projects or policy we don't really know for sure what we're doing with the
It's messy.
I love it.
We're only 30 towns in. It'll come to us what to do with it.
Absolutely.
Maybe we'll be like you and do podcasts. We don't know.
Who knows, right? Anything could happen. Anything.
Yeah, we just don't know enough of the bulk of the result.
Yeah.
It's pretty neat. It's at individual towns, but as you go, the shape of Kansas starts to look different. Would you say, do you see that already?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. How so? Like, what's shifted? Either of you can chime in on that.
It's these currently, what's striking me most is these towns of under 100 and how they exist. Mm-hmm. Because we've been concentrating on volunteer-led towns in general, which are usually under 1,500 population. But on this trip, we're starting to see the towns under 100 have their own set of specific issues. And there's about 100 of those towns that are under 100 population. And so I think we're seeing those towns differently, more specifically than previously. But the shape of Kansas changes too with finding out how young people are utilized, valued in a town. That changes the shape of Kansas. Housing, childcare, broadband, access to food, healthy food, healthcare. You know, so it's sort of like Kansas looks like this, and then we go to a bunch of towns, and then it just changes a little bit, and it's morphing and maybe pulsating at different issue points.
Yeah. Anything?
It's one thing to talk about like housing in rural areas. We're keeping track of the places that we hear housing is an issue. People in Topeka know housing is an issue. We like know this thing, but and it's one thing to talk about it, and then it's another thing to go to a town where someone says there are 5 families right now that want to move back. Families bringing kids into the school district. Families they want to come back and they can't because they can't find a house that works for them. So when you start thinking about it more specifically like that, it's hard to quantify, really. It's hard to, sort of imagine, but then as soon as you start to put a little bit of a shape to it, you kind of get it in a different way. And if this is one town and there's already, 10 towns like that, that we're hearing similar stories, it doesn't take long before that can become something.
What isn't known, everybody knows housing is an issue, but what they don't maybe see, feel, hear is that people want to move to these towns. And when you're in the town, you look at it and you go, that would really make a difference if 5 families could move back here.
Exactly.
Or 3 elderly people want to move out of their house, opening it up for a family, but they don't want to move. They want to stay there. But is there a place for them to live? So that's another angle of it that, again, you can kind of talk about, but until you're seeing it and someone's pointing down the street, literally, house at a place, it's hard to feel it.
Housing is such like a game of musical chairs, and in a town that small, you can really see it happening. Of like, until somebody gets up, there's no chair for you to sit in, and like they can't even get up out of their chair because there's no new chair for them to go sit in. Like it's just such a choke point for economic development.
And then it's capacity, because in these smallest of towns, no one knows they should go to the housing conference to learn how to write grants to get a set of moderate income duplexes.
Right.
They're just not connected, because sometimes the city clerk email changes per city clerk. And so that town gets totally lost in the shuffle. We're trying to find at least one contact in every town so we can ask, so they're not invisible.
What has been, I want to say, like the most surprising, but in general, like what kind of caught you off guard by how it felt? I mean, it sounds like you do a lot of feeling in your line of work. Like, what was something that you witnessed that just like really was like, wow, I didn't expect that today.
I know. Oh, I don't. So it was one of our really early towns. Everything's still early now, but it was the town where we drove through, and there were buildings, but they were not businesses. They clearly had like a nice library, a fire department, a school, but hard to tell what was going on. And we went to the restaurant and just started talking to the people working there. And it was the first time it was like, okay, we asked the question, what's going on here that we can't see? And the answer was just so heartfelt. And it was the town. It was like, oh yeah, we're starting to get together. We have a lot of dreams. They use the word dreams. We know some things, we have a road project going on, but we need to get a sewer project going on. So we don't have to tear up our new road to get the new, it was somebody who was plugged in, knew what was going on, but it was emotion. It was, we're trying, we want to do something. We don't always know what to do. And have this great conversation. They walk away, and I just looked at Marci, and she said, "This is how you fall in love." And it is, because it's like, it would have been easy for anybody. Just be like, nothing going on here. Let's go. And the real story is just pure. And, I don't know. There's a lot of that.
I think the surprise for me is the continued willingness of people to share with us. And like that town Sarah's talking about, it doesn't necessarily look like it's loved until you start hearing people talk, and then you start seeing it differently.
Yeah.
And you start, but it's also how many people are so invested in their communities in different ways, but in like, you'd think that people will be willing to volunteer or do things for big successes. But when the steps are so tiny, you get tired. But there's so many people in these towns that just, I love my town. I'm from here. I'm just going to keep doing what I can. And it's only surprising because that's not the narrative that's out there.
Sure. I mean, that's, like pop culture in general. One of the things that kind of irks me a little bit that's said in pop culture a lot these days is nobody wants to work anymore. And I personally, that's like one of the impeti, I don't know, for this podcast in general, is like, look at all of these beautiful people doing such beautiful work in the world. Like, you just couldn't ever convince me that nobody wants to work. I know them personally. We're talking right now. And that these people exist everywhere. Like, even in a town of 100 people, like, here's somebody that is tuned in, tapped in, wanting to make it better, wanting to raise the quality of life in that town for themselves and anybody else who lives there. Like, who asked them to do that? Who pointed at them and said, here, you need to do this? Probably no one. And yet there they are. And it's like, I love the human spirit. I love when we fall in love. And then it's like, you just go and go and go and go and go, because the effort itself is life-giving to a certain extent. Like, to see the progress, even if it is teeny little steps, like that alone is satisfying and fuel to keep going for next time. Super glad you guys have had those experiences already, like right off the bat in your first little bit. I got to think, for a 4-year project, it's going to take a lot of fuel in the tank to make sure you make it, And I'd be curious, do you have any advice on how to structure a long-term undertaking like this so that you don't burn out, so that you do make it to the end of what you're hoping to accomplish?
Yeah, do you have any advice? Because I would like to hear it.
I guess it really does.
In a way, the trip feeds you. It also, it might just sound like, oh, you just drive around, talk to people. That's easy. But, you got to find the wherewithal to talk to another person and go to yet one more place and do it in a way that brings out some thoughts that are good to be shared. But it's you're gonna get tired. I mean, but it feeds you too. It really does. It's you just need to take care of yourself. I think one thing we're doing on the trip already is like going to fun places like this, the town of Burdett. They have a miniature golf course you can play for free in their community park, and it's dedicated to Clyde Tombaugh, who's a native who discovered Pluto. So it's got all these space facts. So we stopped and played a game of miniature golf. And I think would you agree, doing those kind of things just helps add some lightness to the day?
Yeah.
It was a good thing we didn't keep score.
Yeah.
Why is that?
We both would have lost.
Yeah.
Only losers. But what would you add to that, Sarah?
So, I mean, I think about it. Like sometimes I feel like I work for a 30-year-old startup, because with this co-director thing that's new, there's some change and trying to figure out what the future looks like, which is energizing and scary. And that can take a lot out of a person, it turns out. We have a good team, we have a good board. And I think it's even things like this where people are interested, want to know, want to be involved.
Yeah.
There's a lot of energy in that. So trying to use the energy like productively and helping all of us go together towards this point that we don't know yet, but we know it's somewhere and we're going to go find it together. That's very energizing.
Yeah.
I just want to add to that a little bit. Another person we hired, Simone Elder, she's going to focus on the power ups, the 21 to 39s who are rural by choice. And to have this team, Wendy and Simone, Sarah, our part-time bookkeeper, Kim. I think that's, we're a team, and there's some energy in a team concept. And if we all bring out the best in each other, that helps keep you going.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Like all of those same things energize me on my path. As far as being aligned with the work is a big part of it. The work itself feeding you is a huge part of it. But also like the people I'm working with, the other people who are interested and excited about the work that we're doing, like all of that kind of feels like borrowing energy in those moments when maybe, like it's gas tank's running a little bit empty. But it sounds like you guys also are doing like, how did you say that you're picking the communities or the counties at random and like a certain,
right?
What's that?
It's random, all right.
Yeah. Just drawing them out of a hat, or what's that look like?
It's just sort of like, I've heard about someone in this county doing good things. Let's go see them. And then we do the whole county.
Sure.
Yeah. Or it's sort of just.
One of us is a planner.
Which one?
She's a planner, and I'm a little more random, or just, it feels like we should go southeast today or this week. And so, but we're a good balance. We complement each other really well.
I was going to ask you, like, as far as the co-directorship model, what are the ways where you feel like the co-directorship is creating kind of what would it be, like a more robust version of what you're capable of? Because, Sarah brings this and Marci brings this, and like, no one is the whole thing, but we each bring our part. Like, what would you say? How does your unique co-directorship kind of shake out as far as what each person brings to the table?
It just is, I mean, I wouldn't say we planned very well, like go through her traits and my traits and say, let's bring these out and leave that over there. It's not like putting the puzzle together beforehand, but as we go and we need a puzzle piece right there, it just sort of develops who has the strengths to be that puzzle piece. And I'll use the word lucky again. I just feel like we've it's not really luck. It's that we've known each other over years,
Mm-hmm.
and in a strategic, planned way, this co-directorship was developed because we thought it could work.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure we even know what the future holds, but I'm pretty darn confident that between us, we can make it happen with Simone, with Wendy, with Kim. It's sort of just how the team operates.
Mm-hmm.
And then we've got this beautiful network. If we can't do it, we just bring in someone else that can add that part.
Totally. Would you add anything to that, Sarah? I know you said like you're the planner. She's a little more like free flowing, if we can call it that. Like, yeah. Any other distinctions?
I think that because we kind of worked together off and on, we already sort of knew like things that we were good at. So we, like she said, we didn't have to go back over them. Like we'll need to write a letter or plan a conference. One of us will start and the other will come in, and then we'll just kind of go back and forth. And we don't have to, start anything from scratch. It's like, who has the bandwidth to start? Who has some of that has been developed over time, and it's coming in really handy right now. I think the thing I would say that's not necessarily a difference, but something that's shared, is that there's a lot of trust, and we talk about trust a lot. I personally, so no one asks her when she's retiring, they ask me, like 100% across the board, because this is Kansas and everyone's so nice to each other. So like I have been getting a lot of advice about like, make her set a retirement date. And my answer is no, because we'll know it. She'll know it.
Yeah.
And she'll tell me if people are thinking she's dead weight.
Yeah.
I mean, I really trust that someone will. But until then.
Right. So, and that's why we don't have an interim director, because that assumes there's a date when that person either takes over or you find a new one or whatever. This is just what works for us.
Mm-hmm.
We suspect it could work for other people, but it couldn't happen, I don't think, if there wasn't a lot of trust.
And communication, it sounds like mostly you're figuring it out on the fly. It's like moment to moment, who has capacity, who's,
and that's kind of the plan. Like, what's the plan? We figure it out together. We figure it out as we go. And what do I say? Plan to be organic, which I came up with to make myself feel better. But it's really true. That's the plan.
Yeah.
I feel like I do things that are good. She then makes them great. And that's, because that holds a lot of potential for the future. If we say that the 30 years have been really good, now this new team, Simone and Sarah, come in, let's make it great. Let's do it together. But that's your challenge. Let's take it up. Let's level it up. Let's take it up. And because it just the energy gets static if you're okay with how it's been. But if everybody wants to make it better and nobody has an ego that's going to get crushed, or, if we just want the best for our rural communities, then it all works pretty darn well.
Wow. I feel like that's such great advice for any kind of transition of any organization. Like in grocery specifically, we have a lot of grocery stores that are owned by baby boomers. And so as they're wanting to retire, we're having to transition all of these stores. And as we're doing research in, what makes a successful transition, one of the pieces that can kind of obliterate the success in one fell swoop is when the outgoing owner wants the new owner to like just do it their way, just kind of like carry on the tradition. It ain't broke, so don't fix it kind of things. And then they get all bent out of shape when the new owner's like, oh, and I want to do this and I want to add this. And have you ever thought about, oh, we could do it like this? And the outgoing owner's like, no, 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 no. And like, it just, it's what you said, like, it's not about your way or the other person's way. It's like, what's best for the community? What does the community need? And how can each of us work together to serve the community that we're trying to serve? And that does take, something a little bit higher up than our personal ego, Yeah. Yeah.
Well said.
Well, you started it. Well said on your end first. That oh gosh. Yeah, making that transition, it sounds like you're, within the first year, you have this 4-year process of going to all the places in the state. So we know we're going to be in this transition for at least a few years. And then after that, who knows? Who knows what's possible? Could be anything.
Yeah, the road work usually leads to what's next.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know?
I would love to get to hear as you continue on your journey and your travels and the patterns continue to kind of reveal themselves. I would love to have another conversation at some point and get to hear about what's emerging and how the shape of Kansas continues to change.
You know where to find us.
Yeah, very good. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate you joining me, taking time out of all of this to come and share your story. I've personally really enjoyed getting to learn a little bit more about KSF and getting to hear more about Sarah's background. You guys are such a gift for every community that you visit in Kansas, and I'm so grateful for you both doing this work. I thank you.
We're really lucky get to do it.
Thank
you, Marli, and thanks for asking such good questions and letting us share and hear ourselves talk about what we do, because we don't do that very often, and I found it interesting. Did you?
Yeah. Cool. Thank you so much.
Marli.
Thank you.